is another one.
We have some breaking news for you on this program that I just learned about Dan Bongino and his future at the FBI. Because we know Dan, and he's been a bit of a mentor to me, quite frankly. He's always been very helpful in our show, even calling me randomly to give me pointers on certain things. He's just been a wise advisor. He's always been good, and he's been solid. He cares a lot about this country, and he has a heart of gold, and a very big heart. And he's somebody that wants to make it a better place. And the fallout from the Epstein saga, of course, caused Dan to say, it's going to be really tough to return to my show, to do what I love to do after all of this. If it really goes south, will people trust me? Because they don't trust this stuff, and we haven't done it in the right way. Now, I called a number of people with direct knowledge of this, and this was Dan's frustration, is that the disclosures were not great, and the way that it was handled and the way that it was released was not great, and that he was being blamed in part for it. And so Dan didn't show up to work and sort of gave an ultimatum to President Trump and said, hey, listen, Pam Bondi either goes or I go. And he and Pam Bondi had quite a bit of a blow-up at the White House on Wednesday. Dan hadn't showed up to work since, and I don't want to see Dan go. Neither did the American people, by the way.
It's Bongino or Bondi. He's not
Who would you guys prefer, Bongino or Bondi?
Yeah.
Okay, 7,000 to 0.
They want Dan.
I just did some phone calls.
Obviously.
And I found out that Dan Bongino not only is back working at the FBI, that cooler heads have prevailed here, that Dan is actually working on something very, very important. And also, everything's changed. There is a positive mood for Dan, according to my source, after further internal movement towards Epstein disclosures and transparency. Trump team is back together and locking in. That's what I was told directly from my source. But this is what else I got from another
I'll believe this when I see some evidence, right? Check out raw alerts after. I'll look after that.
There are some big things happening that we may not be able to see right now, but it's been very positive. All of you in the comment section, posting on X, writing right here, letting your voice be heard in whatever way that you do that, it's worked. Further sources confirm to me there's going to be a major change in approach to the way that this Epstein file will be handled by the administration. Expect more disclosures. Very powerful people inside the admin are now pushing for special counsel. Full press briefing on Epstein findings. Important to note that this drastic change happened after our voices were heard, but also Steve Bannon.
Remember, I told y'all Malding about this would work. I said this shit would work.
Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and a number of other people, Charlie Kirk, really locking in and giving some tough love to the administration over this.
This is why I said this before. Music is off the small indie vibes of Blizzard. Yeah, I know music a bit weird. But anyway, let me see what the fuck this other thing is here. But yeah, no, I've felt this way about it for a while, just because of how ridiculous this shit is. Officials say metadata from the raw Epstein prison video shows approximately 2 minutes and 53 seconds were removed from one of the two stitched together clips. The cut starts right at the missing minute. Ah, wow, that's convenient. Damn. Okay, well, that pretty much that settles it. Okay. Well, so now it's not even 1 minute, it's almost 3 minutes. That's crazy. Yeah, is it 1 minute or 2? Well, this is the way, and again, there's no real way to be sure about any of this stuff, right? We can't be 100% certain about it, but, again, we'll have to find, it keeps getting longer. Yeah, I think so. The clip isn't even of the cell. It helps nothing and it proves nothing. Yeah, it's just bullshit, man. I don't know why people are putting up with this. It's speed running. Yeah, I guess so. And this is what's crazy about it, too. Even Kevin Spacey came out and said something about this. I would have never fucking expected that. I'll tell you that. Like, what? Kevin Spacey is throwing in his 2 cents about this. What is this? And so, who was listed as a passenger who was listed as a passenger on the Lolita Express has called for the immediate release of the Epstein files. Release the Epstein files, all of them. For those of us with nothing to fear, the truth can't come soon enough. I hate to make this about me, but the media already has. So here's another thing that I find is interesting. Spacey, allegations, outcome. Kevin Spacey was acquitted of all sexual assault charges in the UK trial in 2023, following the UK trial, which has been paused pending an outcome. And so why isn't anybody talking about Kevin Spacey's acquittal? He got acquitted. He won the ruling. So this is what I think is very funny about this, is that this guy got accused. He's still canceled, though. Yeah, he might still be a weirdo, but certainly, yeah, innocent man. Well, I don't know about innocent, but some of the things certainly aren't true. People like to stick to what they think, and society's gotten confused between facts. Just because he was found not guilty in court doesn't mean he's not an absolute pervert. I understand the evidence better than the people, the jury and the judge. I understand it much better, for sure. Acquitted doesn't mean that he's innocent. Bill Cosby is also walking free right now. Is he really? I don't know about that. And Spacey's over brother. Yeah, exactly. And so this guy is, yeah, he did get acquitted, but he's probably still weird. Yeah, I think he's probably still weird in one way or another, but at least it's not as bad as we thought, right? And so anyway, wow. So even he, who was on Jeffrey Epstein's jet, wants to have it released. Wow. When are you innocent? When the internet when making a tweet about you being innocent gets a lot of likes. That's the way that you can tell and be sure about it, okay? And I've heard against being a pervert was against the law. This stream would be getting 2K viewers. Listen, I am the I do not do that's not okay. Well, all right. So here's the thing. That shit was weird that he did, right? I mean, like, that shit was really weird. Like, that was crazy. Who does that? Yeah, an acquittal is a formal declaration. The defendant is not guilty of the crime they're charged with in the law. Yeah, Bill Cosby was released in prison in 2021 after they overturned his 2018 sexual assault conviction. Yeah, I guess so. This man is one of the biggest peddlers of all. He's bluffing. He knows they won't release the files. Not much to lose for Kevin Spacey. Yeah, I guess so. How Ghislaine Maxwell once sat on Buckingham Palace thrones with Kevin Spacey, and this was man, these people, like, how did they get the who let them do that? Isn't that weird? That's crazy. Who would do that? Well, what if Trump released the Epstein list tomorrow, names all of them and pardons them, including himself, live on TV? How about that for some content? That would be very good content. I'll certainly tell you that. Now we know why the files will never be released. I guess so. And I just think that's why he's only doing this now because he knows it won't be released. He's guilty as fuck. I don't think he cares. Like, the guy's life got totally fucking destroyed. I mean, I'm going to be totally honest, right? I mean, his life got totally fucking destroyed by these allegations. So he has nothing to lose. There's no reason for him not to say this. And so, yeah, and yeah, you release the Epstein files, all of them. For those of us with nothing to fear, the truth can't come soon enough. I hate this to make the bad thing. You know they aren't going to come out now, so you pretend like you want them. Nice try. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe, right? And so there you go. Trump possibly used Epstein's client list to blackmail business leaders into absorbing tariffs, preventing inflation. Well, you can't let people do that, right? I mean, that's never going to work. And also, like, that'll eventually backfire at one way or another. You can't be doing stuff that way. Nothing. Yeah, there it is. And Kevin Spacey accuser dies by suicide the day after the actor posts "killed them with kindness" video. Kevin Spacey won't face criminal charges in groping case after accuser's death. It's crazy. This guy has plot armor or something, right? That's crazy. How does that happen? What are the odds? The video is sick as fuck. Yeah, I never watched the video that Tucker Carlson did with him or anything like that. And so, yeah, I guess we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But Kevin Spacey was banned from Epstein Island. No, that's just, no. Bro, this is some crazy... yeah, nah, bro, like, we're not getting into that. I'm not even gonna read that bullshit. Yeah, maybe use resurrection spell, I guess so, right? Too much of a degen? Yeah, nah, that's just some crazy fucking Trump Karen. I wouldn't take it all that seriously. Let me go back down, I'll see if there's any more of these here too. But, oh, this is the last one that we'll probably look at. This is from yesterday. Remember whenever people said that it was fake? What I said about this was fake? Well, here's the video that it's not fake. Isn't that crazy? Wow. There's so many gaslighters on this topic on Twitter. It's insane. I think that, so here's the problem and here's the reason why it's happening. Let me explain why. So a lot of people don't want to accept the reality that this is actually happening, and it's a legitimate problem. And because they're afraid of accepting that reality, most people are attached to, and they only think in terms of people, and they can't think in terms of ideas. And because of that, they have to tie their values to a person rather than to the idea itself. So that's why you have so many people that are so, like, mindlessly fucking for or against Trump. It's because, again, they can't think about ideas, so they think about people instead. And because of that, they can't accept any ambiguity with certain individuals. So because they can't accept ambiguity with certain individuals, it leads them to lie to themselves because they don't want to accept that certain people are flawed and they can have some good ideas and some bad ideas, which is true with anyone. And so that's really what the problem is more than anything. And so why is she happy? The weakest minds? Well, that's it. Respect ideas, not people. Yes. And so that's really what happens in general. Everybody has pros and cons. Yeah, nobody's perfect. And if you can't contextualize that, you're going to have a lot of problems. Talking about cognitive dissonance, the mind is uncomfortable with things they don't understand since they can't control it. Well, it's more that they thought that they liked this person, and they thought this person was perfect, and this person was the solution for all their problems. And it turns out that this person is actually not perfect, and they have some things wrong with them. And I think that that makes these people uncomfortable. And because they're so uncomfortable, they're trying to look for a way to justify why it's okay. That's it. It's a childish worldview? Yeah, but you can say that, but that's the way that a lot of people think. That's the reason why people stand so hard.
Do you want to get back?
Paul McCartney got back live
Blackbird singing in the dead of
on tour across North America.
You come on to me.
Register now for pre-sale access at paulmccartneygotback.com.
What would be your advice? Given this back and forth, we're just coming off of Turning Point here in Tampa. This was the topic of conversation. What would be your advice in order to take the temperature down on this issue from within the administration?
Well, I do think that there needs to be more transparency on this. And I think that will happen. I mean, look, I don't know what truly exists there, but I know that this is something that's important to the president as well. He does want transparency on all these fronts, that everything we're talking about, because it's frustrated him as well. He sat for 4 years like the rest of us did and saw lie after lie and saw our country just being sent down the wrong path. And it was really frightening and very upsetting to a lot of people. And I would actually say over the past 10 years, we've all kind of endured this. Prior to that, it was probably happening, Benny, but we just weren't as aware of it. It wasn't until Donald Trump came down that golden escalator that he just kind of blew the doors off of everything, and people started to wake up and realize, wait a minute, things are not happening.
Everybody's waking up. Why does he want them to go back to sleep? You can't wake everybody up and be like, all right, guys, never mind. False alarm.
Always been presented to us.
I made it up.
And I do believe that you will see that. Now, as it relates to the president, I know that this is probably not his number one thing he's focused on. He's focused on a lot of other important things. We've got this big announcement with Russia going on, I think, as we're speaking right now at the White House. We have, a Middle East. We're trying to get peace over there. We're trying to make sure that Iran's nuclear arsenal is obviously completely decimated. We want to make sure everything is on the right track for this country. Fortunately, you've seen no border crossings in the last month. Zero, by the way. I think that's incredible. No one's talking about that enough. Zero illegal border crossings in the month of June. Amazing how that's all gone. So I don't know that this was top of mind for him, but he hears all the noise and he hears all of the consternation out there. And I think he's going to want to set things right as well. So I believe that there will probably be more coming on this. And
if he doesn't set this right, he's going to lose the Republicans, the midterms, the whole thing. He's going to lose the whole thing, and there's probably going to be a Democrat that gets elected for the next president. That's what's going to happen. Yep.
I believe anything that they are able
even after Iran? Yeah.
Release that doesn't damage any witnesses or anyone underage or anything like that, I believe they'll probably try to get out sooner rather than later because they hear it and they understand it. So
I don't know about that. Okay, clip it.
Hopefully we see that happen sooner than later. And I guess that would be my advice. But to everybody out there who's all worked up about it, there's no great plot to keep this information away that I'm aware of. I do just believe that maybe...
That I'm aware of.
It's been slow roll.
You don't even know what the information is. You said at the beginning you don't even know what the information is, but now you're saying that there's not a plot to keep it under wraps. How would you know that there's not a plot if you don't even know what it is in the first place?
For reasons that hopefully we understand down the line, and I think we're probably going to get more transparency on it very soon.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. And again, it won't get released, Asmon. Too much money and power involved, I believe. Well, all of these people's money and power, I hope this is true. Yeah, all of their money and power is tied to their influence and their ability to have people vote for them. So if that doesn't happen, then they totally fall apart. And that's what it is. Shout out Barron Trump trying to, maybe if Barron, they need to get Barron Trump to tell, like, Dad, you need to put it out. They're really, no, I know, no. But they're actually mad about this one for real. Like, you gotta at least put out like 3 names or something like that. Like, do something. Barron will release it. Yeah, somebody gotta do it. Wouldn't it be funny if Democrats or Republicans both start protesting and get the files released? I mean, again, I think that, this has united people in a way that I didn't expect it. So, yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Over 350,000 small businesses trust Zensurance. Zensurance provides low-cost business insurance for hundreds of industries across Canada. Save up to 35% on your insurance. Get an instant price and coverage in just a few clicks. No business is too small. Policies starting from $19 a month. Get a free quote at zensurance.com.
It's time for Lefties Losing It, and it's time to check in again on the lunatic asylum masquerading as a news network known as MSNBC. And let's listen to this hot take from Joe Scarborough.
And we'll look at the Epstein stuff as well. What is this here?
I believe that it must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. My fellow citizens, let no one doubt that this is a difficult and dangerous effort on which we have set out. No one can foresee precisely what course it will take.
Picture this. You are an American citizen. It's 1945, and your country just deployed the sun over Japan. Then they signed a peace treaty, and a few months back, the USSR took Berlin. And this all led to the end of the bloodiest conflict in human history, World War II.
After Cold Germany ran out of gas and were defeated at the Battle of Stalingrad, the gears of the entire war began to shift. In reverse.
And after all of that death and destruction, you would probably be thinking that the world would go into a time of peace, After World War II, and won, by the way. How can anyone ever want any more war? Today's video is sponsored by Aura. Spam calls and texts are something that I always get, and I don't like it, and it makes me really upset. Just the other day, I got this ridiculous phishing text claiming I won a cruise. Yeah, right! One reason we get so many of these text and spam calls is because big companies cannot keep our data safe. Look at AT&T. Or Ticketmaster. 560 million users. It's a nightmare. At best, it leads to more spam. At worst, it leads to your identity being stolen. you becoming a victim of fraud. Thank you to today's sponsor, Aura. It sends me fraud alerts quickly if someone tries to use my data to access any of my accounts. I get them sometimes. It also, on my behalf, removes my information from data broker sites, which reduces spam tenfold. Aura also offers transaction monitoring, a VPN, and parental controls, identity theft insurance, anything. It's all in one app at an affordable price. My info is compromised by Ticketmaster or AT&T, which it absolutely was for both. I don't really give a shit because I've got Aura, keeping my back safe, keeping my hind end clear. Don't leave yourself or your family vulnerable. Go to aura.com/Oompa. They are a long-term sponsor of the show. If you click my link, which is in the description, you'll get 14 days for free. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you to Aura for supporting the channel. Unfortunately for you, the person who I'm talking to, who's picturing what I'm saying, that reality does not come true, still hasn't come true, and the US and the Soviet Union would enter another war almost immediately after the end of World War II. The craziest war that had ever occurred up until that point. Now, I will say, no actual battles took place, but there were a series of covert operations, propaganda campaigns, and plenty of nuclear threats to get us all tickled, to get us all tight, to get us all puckered, to get us all scared, really. Not all us, I guess. I was born in 1996, and the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991.
This is a victory for democracy and freedom. It's a victory for the moral force of our values.
So I guess I'm just a poser. All these threats, all this propaganda, all these covert operations were to get the upper hand or get the other person or entity, I guess, to be scared enough to surrender and give up and go back home with your tail between their legs. I already mentioned that the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, but the Cold War lasted for about 50 years. And it's impossible to tell how long it would have actually lasted or what exactly could have happened had the USSR not collapsed. That being said, if you look at the geopolitical situation today, we're basically in the same situation. Am I right, guys? Share if you agree.
The US declared at a NATO summit in Washington earlier this month that it will begin deploying the missiles in 2026.
But now it isn't just big bad Russia, it's big bad China and also big bad Russia.
To cover the attackers, Alperovich says, China would strike Taiwan's defenses from afar.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about some of the shit that has gone down between the United States and the USSR, and in general, democracy versus communism.
In the background was the growing struggle between two great powers to shape the post-war world.
And we're going to show you guys how determined the US was to preserve democracy during the Cold War. Communist regimes during the Cold War massacred millions of civilians. In the Soviet Union, China, and Cambodia, governments initiated radical social transformation programs, killing, torturing, or even just starving groups that they saw as hostile to their system, or just they thought they were unworthy of life. I'm not sure. A lot of genocides, though. A lot of evil. A lot of bad men. The communist regimes that took part in these horrible atrocities were driven by ideologies of selective extermination, and they pretty much all the time ignored the moral implications of their actions. Moral implications. Moral relativism, or whatever. And all them commies seem to support each other, and they did that Spider-Man meme, and then they were like, oh, that's legitimacy for these mass killings because they're like us, they're also doing it. Let's just kill people who we don't like en masse. A lot of the evil regimes during the Cold War believed that eliminating opposition was purely necessary for revolutionary goals, purely necessary to instill the values and the ideologies that their governments were based on. You have to kill a lot of people to get the point across, unfortunately. Or at least that's what they thought. Entire communities of people were wiped out based on perceived threats to visions of progress, communistic visions of progress. Thank you, bald guy from late 1800s, and other guy who was his protege. The terror during the Cold War was relentless, and the suffering was immense. And even after moving away from systemic extermination, which a lot of these governments did, the regimes continued to commit atrocities. The Soviet Union's brutal actions in Afghanistan, and the horrific 1989 Beijing massacre by the Chinese government, which was right before the collapse of the Soviet Union, and so was Afghanistan, by the way.
Tiananmen Square, Beijing, 1989. The Chinese government sends tanks into the square, shooting at unarmed civilians and students. An abrupt end to political reforms that once brought people so much hope.
And I'm not saying that we are much better, but at least we pretend to be. I don't want to hear it, okay, guys? I'll make a different video for democratic atrocities. All right? Jeez. But yeah, Afghanistan and the Chinese Tiananmen Square Beijing massacre are prime examples of ongoing disregard for human life even after the Cold War began to sort of become less terrible, because it started off really bad and then the 70s was terrible. I mean, there was an actual genocide in the 70s. It seemed like ideological solidarity was a big time problem amongst communist governments. They often turned a blind eye to each other's crimes and further entrenched their power, which extended the suffering of millions for a very long time. Guys, share if you find this surprising. So now on to the meat of the video. We're gonna be talking about a couple operations, maybe some crazy science that went down in the Cold War, and also my friend Manic Cadence is going to be joining me on this video. He's got 2 little chapters in this big ass long thing. If you guys want to see more content between me and Manic Cadence, more videos like this, press the like button down below and also subscribe to Manic Cadence.
The rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War fueled an arms race like never before seen on Earth. We might associate this with atomic weapons, but it wasn't just that. There was a race to scientific dominance, engineering dominance, rocketry dominance. It didn't stop. And if we're being honest, no one but the military-industrial complex likes the idea of war or preparing for one. But it pushed both countries to be something that they could never have been without each other. And now that atomic weapons were on the table, the US and the Soviet Union were both so desperate to achieve scientific and technological dominance that they would both do nearly anything to get a leg up on one another. So as World War II was coming to an end, there was a secret scramble to gobble up all that juicy Nazi science that made Germany such a domineering force. As Allied troops pushed through Nazi-occupied territory at the end of the war, groups like the Combined Intelligence Objective Subcommittee followed in the wake of the front lines to snatch up any documents or equipment tied to the Nazi war machine. As military bases and research facilities were captured by Allied forces, scientists were being interrogated to give up all of their Nazi secrets. And it was during this campaign that the Allied forces trailing behind the front lines found something that would make their job a little easier, a little bit more efficient. A comprehensive cataloged list of scientists and engineers who had worked on the Third Reich's behalf. The Olsenberg list. And this valuable little who's who of Nazi scientists and engineers was never meant to be found. In a desperate hurry to attempt to get rid of it, somebody had jammed it down a toilet at Bonn University. It was packed with all the hate, girth, and density of an oversized heroin shit that you can't flush down. And that's why the Allied forces were able to find it. And as America flipped through the pages of notable and useful scientists that they saw before them, they had an idea. What if they could grab up the best Nazi minds and use them to bolster their own position in the growing conflict with the Soviet Union? I mean, sure, the whole world had just fought to keep Nazis and their ideas from coming across sovereign borders, but why not just bring Nazis and their ideas home? It was no secret that Hitler had heavily focused on technology and science to galvanize his military strength. He was quick to reward his best minds financially and with positions of power. But now these men were scrambling to get out of the way of the war that they had supported with their scientific prowess, and would be desperate to avoid being brought to justice by military tribunals, international trials like the Nuremberg trials, or worse, tortured and killed by groups of vigilante Nazi hunters. Immunity, and safety for that matter, was a gigantic bargaining chip, and they could offer the most valuable Nazi thinkers complete immunity and a chance to continue their scientific pursuits in America. Like a Catholic confession with a creepy old priest, the US could wipe away their sins, and at the same time, they'd be keeping those same scientific juggernauts away from the Soviet Union. Now, it was obviously a bad look to pardon and then hire the enemy and the perpetrators of the Holocaust and its horrors, but the risks of leaving them for the Soviets proved too much, so America would just conduct its recruitment quietly. The U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff officially established Operation Overcast on July 20th, 1945. It would be overseen by the newly formed Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, and carried out by special agents in the Army's Counterintelligence Corps, CIC. with the express purpose of acquiring anybody that they felt could advance U.S. rocketry or help develop chemical or biological weapons. They also scoured for krauts that had an advanced knowledge of synthetic fuels, medicine, and many other fields of research. And don't get soft on me, these are Nazis, and I can say krauts, because I'm part German. Have you ever had sauerkraut? It's fucking great. Operation Overcast would come to be known as it is today in November 1945, when the name was changed in practice to Operation Paperclip. The name comes from Ordnance Corps officers who, when scanning through details of German rocketry experts, would add them to their wish list by adding a paperclip to their file, signaling their desire to hire. When President Truman officially sanctioned the operation, he restricted Nazi members and active Nazi supporters from being considered for immunity. But the JIOA and the Office of Strategic Services, or the OSS, who would become the CIA, ignored this exemption and did themselves a deep state. By this, of course, I mean make secret, consequential decisions that they are not authorized to make, bypassing authority and oversight to effectively run the country unelected and unaccountable. Thank God that's not a problem anymore. Instead, they would take actions to erase any incriminating evidence of war crimes from the Nazi scientists' records, whitewashing them into immunity for their sins. And with that pesky little presidential roadblock out of the way, the US government was able to import and employ more than 1,600 German scientists, technicians, and engineers between the years of 1945 and 1959. Along with their families, over 6,000 Germans with ties to the Third Reich made their way to the US. And as an American, you can be disgusted by this, but just know that the checks and balances put into place to keep these things from happening were completely overlooked and ignored. But still, looking back on Operation Paperclip, I'm conflicted, torn between morality and practicality. On one hand, the fact that these men used their God-given talents while serving the Third Reich is absolutely unforgivable. Following orders is no excuse for knowingly aiding in a genocidal world dominance tour. And though they weren't soldiers or military leaders, these intellectual assets happily accepted the financial benefits and societal notoriety that came with their work, at least up until the time that their cowardly Führer swallowed the muzzle of his own weapon while hiding in his bunker. These turncoats deserve only the horrors that they helped bring upon the rest of the world, and then to be sorted by their creator later. On the other hand, however, there were growing Cold War tensions tied to a nuclear arms race producing unimaginable weapons. If America hadn't taken action, the Soviet Union would have been glad to rescue as many Nazi scientists from justice as possible and put them to work against the West. In fact, the Soviets had their own paperclip called Operation Osseverkum. And don't come at me with that pronunciation shit, I don't give a fuck what they called it. And yeah, I got Russian blood in me too, but I don't know what the fuck they're saying. Anyhow, their operation had the upper hand. Geographically and logistically speaking, it was far easier for them to move those in the European theater of war to the Soviet homeland, which is how Operation Osseverkum was able to move 2,200 of their own strategically advantageous Nazis and their families in a single night. Love it or hate it, Operation Paperclip would prove to be a huge asset going forth in the Cold War and the following space race with the Soviet Union. The scientists and knowledge acquired by America was valued at $10 billion in patents and industrial processes, and that's in 1940s and 50s money. The most noteworthy Nazi championed by the US would be Werner von Braun, and this was a big get for the US. Von Braun would be a part of the Nazi all-star team if there was one. He was all in with their ideas, being a card-holding member of the Nazi Party and the Allgemeine SS. But what he offered the Germans was a lot more than loyalty. As an aerospace engineer and space architect, he created the V-2 rocket under Hitler's leadership during World War II, the first long-range guided ballistic missile that the world had ever seen. After the scientific exodus of Germany, he and the team that he'd brought over through Operation Paperclip worked on a ballistic missile project for the US Army and developed the rocket that launched the US's first space satellite in 1958. Just 2 years later, his group of Nazi scientists would be merged into NASA, and he would become the director of the new Marshall Space Flight Center and the chief architect of the Saturn V launch vehicle that would send Apollo astronauts to the moon, if you believe that. In effect, we owe many of NASA's greatest accomplishments to a Nazi. Knowing what kind of backlash it would receive, Operation Paperclip was very much a clandestine operation, being largely hidden from the American population during its execution and the immediate years following. The program remained classified for many years, And while the details of America's top picks of the Nazi draft were not supposed to be disclosed until many, many years later, but it became hard to hide when the accomplishments of these men became the source of American pride, especially in the 1970s and 80s, when it sparked controversy and criticism. I leave it to you to form your own opinion on Operation Paperclip, because it reflects the complexities of the Cold War geopolitics and the lengths that the US and the USSR were willing to go to maintain technological superiority. It's a tough choice, and definitely not a decision that I'd want to make or be responsible for, which is probably why I make videos instead of policy, and play Monday morning quarterback from the safety of YouTube.
Operation Paul Bunyan is one of the most bizarre confrontations in history, and it was between North Korea and the US with South Korea, and it was all over a tree. That's right, guys. This confrontation is about a tree.
Standing at 80 feet tall, it obstructed the view of a checkpoint at the mouth of the Bridge of No Return, the most volatile area of the Korean demilitarized zone.
Operation Paul Bunyan. Pretty funny, isn't it? He's Paul Bunyan! He chops trees! Said tree blocked a crucial line of sight near the DMZ, which caused a significant issue for the UNC, or United Nations Command. On August 18th, 1976, just 11 days before my birthday, I was born in 1976, a team led by Captain Arthur Boniface went to prune the tree. Brave. Very bold. All right, guys, look at that tree. Captain Boniface's team included Captain Kim and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett and 11 other enlisted personnel, both from the United States and South Korea. Due to the rules of the Joint Security Area, or JSA, as we will now be referring to it as, they were unarmed. They only carried mattocks to prune the tree. So these fellas showed up to prune that tree, and shortly after, 15 North Korean soldiers appeared from nowhere, and they ordered them to stop. Captain Boniface, adhering to his orders, ignored them, obviously, because he doesn't give a shit about what the North Koreans say, and they continued the pruning operation. The defiance prompted Lieutenant Pak Chul, also known as the Bulldog by UNC troops due to previous aggressive encounters, to take drastic measures. Bulldog sent a runner across the Bridge of No Return, which looks like this, pretty crazy, to call for reinforcements, and within minutes, a truck arrived with 20 more North Korean soldiers armed with crowbars and clubs. Lieutenant Pak Chul then did something that would escalate the situation fairly dramatically, I suppose. He removed his watch from his wrist, carefully wrapped it in a handkerchief, placed it in his pocket, and screamed, "Kill the bastards!" And this marked the beginning of a brutal assault. The North Korean soldiers attacked the unarmed UNC personnel. They bludgeoned Captain Boniface to death with their clubs, and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett was also killed in the ensuing chaos. And you might notice as well, this is 1976, 20 years after the end of the Korean War. Not a good thing to kind of restart a war over a tree. The attackers quickly loaded the bodies into their truck and fled the scene.
Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State responsible for the aggressive bombing campaign during the Vietnam War, urged the president for an attack on the North Korean barracks to capture the bloody killers.
And the incident, later known as the Korean Axe Murder Incident, sent shockwaves through the ranks of the US and South Korean military. You think you'd probably have heard about this. I had never heard about this until researching this video. The Korean Axe Murders. The what? That sounds like a cool metal band. Are you telling me people died? Innocent people died over a fucking tree? The immediate aftermath was a scramble to understand what had just happened and how the fuck to respond. The response obviously needed to be swift and decisive, but also measured to avoid a full-scale war like the one that they just ended. The US and South Korea's response was nothing short of spectacular, in all honesty. Thinking about it almost gives me goosebumps. Almost! I'm not that simple, all right? We came together and we devised Operation Paul Bunyan, a show of overwhelming force designed to send a clear message to North Korea without escalating into a full-blown conflict. On August 21st, 1976, just 3 days after the attack, a massive convoy was sent to the JSA. The convoy included 23 American and South Korean vehicles with 2 teams of 8 men armed with, guess, chainsaws to cut down the tree, okay? Because the tree, we lost 2 men, but the tree is still a problem. You get out of here, you little dumbass. She's a communist sympathizer. The chainsaw teams obviously needed to be protected. They were protected by 2 30-man security platoons armed with pistols and axe handles. Additionally, Company B was on standby with a detonation system to blow up the Freedom Bridge if necessary. I love the names of the bridges, dude. The Bridge of No Return, the Freedom Bridge, Guess which one's on which side? They also had a 64-man task force trained in Taekwondo, very South Korean of them, initially armed with clubs and later equipped with M16s and M79 grenade launchers to, you know, match any sort of escalation that might potentially happen. Also, the air support was just as impressive. There were 20 utility helicopters and 7 Cobra attack helicopters that hovered nearby. Beyond that, we had B-52 Stratofortresses escorted by US F-4 Phantom IIs that flew in the air as a show of American dominance.
Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you.
And some South Korean F-5s and F-86 fighters that were on alert and ready to go as well, I guess. Not as cool as the Stratofortress, but pretty cool still. Now, this sheer display of force had the intention of being intimidating. Let's intimidate North Korea into feeling bad. It worked, guys. It worked. North Korea responded with approximately 150 to 200 troops armed with machine guns and assault rifles to the scene. And when the UNC began Operation Paul Bunyan, the North Korean troops watched from a distance, a really far distance, clearly outmatched by the overwhelming US and South Korean presence. Operation Paul Bunyan commenced at 0700 hours, and in just 42 minutes, the tree was chopped down. Thank God. All right, guys, bless us. The convoy then swiftly left the area and the mission was accomplished. The only casualty of this massive operation was the tree itself. Of course, that is if you do not include the 2 men who died in the Korean axe murders, all right? I don't mean to laugh. That's incredibly disrespectful. I'm sorry about that. But the way I said it was kind of accidentally funny. I'm sorry. This overwhelming show of force not only removed the tree, but also served as a significant embarrassment to North Korea. They can suck it, all right? 1 L though, because 2 L's makes a double. The North Koreans were forced to back down and later issued a statement of regret for their earlier violence. The entire incident, which started with a tree and escalated to the brink of war, ended with a display of military power that highlighted the tensions and absurdities of the Cold War era. This was all over a tree. A tree. A tree. A tree. 2 people died because of a tree. Operation Paul Bunyan is not only remembered for its immediate and instant insane conflagration and impact, but also for its broader implications. It showcased the extremely delicate balance of power on the Korean peninsula and the lengths to which nations would go to maintain their positions. The operation also demonstrated the importance of clear communication and overwhelming force in dealing with volatile situations, especially when it's about a tree, all right? In the end, the operation served its purpose. Cool name, cool result. Operation Paul Bunyan, a very powerful reminder that there is a potential for escalation no matter what, even in the most seemingly trivial conflict. Share this with a friend if you found it unbelievable. During the Cold War, there were conflicts all around the world. For example, the conflict in Vietnam. The goal for us in the Vietnam War was to eliminate the red tyranny of communism, hoping to stop the spread from the Soviet Union into Southeast Asia, all right?
There is a war going on in South Vietnam. I think last week there were over 500 killings, assassinations, bombings.
People down there, you got China, you got Cambodia, you got the Korean Peninsula. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. The Korean War just happened, and we have to stop the red tyrant, the red demon. All right, guys? The red demon. While many people know about the Vietnam War, few know about the horrifying events in Cambodia involving the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot.
From 1975 to 1979, the Khmer Rouge regime cemented themselves as one of the most brutal dictatorships in human history.
It is actually mind-boggling how few people know of Pol Pot and the recent happening of the entire Khmer Rouge genocide. Like, anyways, since North Vietnam was a communist and was supported by the Soviets, they were on the wrong side of history, loser! And the US, as you probably could imagine, took drastic measures to ensure victory, regardless of cost. They sought help from Prince Sihanouk of Cambodia. Sorry if I said that wrong, but he wanted to say neutral. All right, guys, he's kind of a Swiss. He's a Swissman. A short while later, though, in 1970, after waiting for too long, the prince was overthrown by his prime minister, Pol Pot, and that gave the U.S. the green light to start bombing the shit out of Cambodia. They targeted North Vietnamese fighters that were crossing the border, and they also killed a lot of Cambodian citizens and Vietnamese refugees as well. Countless. I mean, it's an actual atrocity. In the name of democracy, me. Democracy Manifest.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
So years later, in 1975, and desperate to regain power, the prince allied with Khmer Rouge. Khmer Rouge is probably a name that you've heard before. Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot, they are bros, basically. He's prime minister. Khmer Rouge is like a gang, like the tunnel snakes from Fallout, if they were giant assholes. Not really a gang, more of a communist regime. But in the meantime, though, the UN and the West saw that a civil war was brewing and some conflict was breaking out, and we held a vote, I guess. Surprisingly, both China and the US, along with Britain, voted to keep the Khmer Rouge in power. The Khmer Rouge led by Prime Minister Pol Pot. By the way, a communist regime. It's like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's where it, yeah. The title card. That's right, guys. The title card. The U.S. funneled funds into Khmer Rouge, reportedly more than $85 million, which is this much money now. All of this in effort to gain favor with China and pull them away from the Soviet Union, because, once again, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And you're like, well, how? Why would we want to be friends with China? Don't they suck? Or whatever? Not really. But even back then, they really did. We didn't really know that they were killing birds and stuff, and they had this, like, big frog leap forward or whatever this guy, Mayo or something, was talking about. I'm not really sure. But supporting Khmer Rouge to get China to move away from the Soviet Union seemed like a really good idea. Unfortunately, though, the Khmer Rouge used this support to commit a horrific genocide, killing 1.5 to 2 million people, nearly 25% of the population of Cambodia at the time, which is fucking insane. And the Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, is one of the most brutal regimes in modern history, specifically one that is not that old and was backed by the United States of America. By the way, in 1975, the White House lobbied Congress for $200 million more to give Khmer Rouge and the Cambodian regime, but luckily, apparently 85 million went. I'm not really sure, but I'm glad more didn't go. The Khmer Rouge's goal was to transform Cambodia into a rural, classless society, the classic communist dream, I guess. They abolished money, private property, and religion. They forced people into labor camps where they faced starvation, overwork, and also execution. Just death, basically. The regime's methods were horrifying and systemic, with killing fields where mass executions took place. People were executed for even the slightest suspicion of dissent or for being deemed unworthy of their life due to their education or profession, which is terrible. I don't really even know what to say. I'm at a loss for words. The conflict didn't end there. After the end of our part of the Vietnam War, Vietnam moved into Cambodia in 1978 to fight against the Khmer Rouge because it was terrible, killing a lot of people. And this led to the Cambodian-Vietnamese War, partly as revenge for cross-border attacks during the Vietnam War. That included the Ba Chuk massacre, where the Khmer Rouge wiped out over 3,000 Vietnamese villagers and contributed to a total of 30,000 Vietnamese killed or tortured by that regime.
From April 18th to 30th, 1977, the Khmer Rouge launched a surprise attack on 13 Vietnamese villages in 8 different provinces. In their 12-day occupation, they massacred the people of the villages, with Ba Chuk village being the hardest hit.
Vietnam managed to end the genocide in just 17 days, but faced massive international backlash. For example, China invaded Vietnam in February of 1979 because they ended the Khmer Rouge regime that they were sponsoring. Oh, so were we. At the same time that all of that happened, the US continued to impose sanctions on Vietnam. In spite of all the atrocities committed by the Khmer Rouge, which is, there's no argument that they did commit them, the US and China preferred to maintain their strategic positions, punishing Vietnam for toppling the genocidal regime. It really just comes down to the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The United States believed that, and China believed that during this time. And they still believe that now, because that's like a foundation of geopolitics. There were many costs in terms of human life in the 70s, but specifically in this case, the strategy that we went with caused the immense suffering of the Cambodian people, which a lot of people just don't know about. So, shout out to the US, baby girl. Share this with your friends.
It's not safe to hope for the best without preparing for the worst.
I don't even know any communists. What can I do? Know your enemy.
If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it.
Suck my dick. I despise you.
It can't happen here. Well, this is what it looks like if it should.
Operation Paperclip showed just how those in the highest rungs of the military-industrial complex were willing to forego the morality and righteous American values that nearly 420,000 Americans died fighting for in World War II. in order to stack their deck against the Soviet Union. Their justification for this could arguably have been valid. The Soviets posed a serious threat to the US as the two rising superpowers with opposing worldviews were breaking new ground in atomic research and weapons development. The USSR was trailing behind, no doubt, but the American lead was a fragile one. Loyalty